Graphing inequalities in two variables. This is typically thought of as one of the more difficult lessons. So really take your time as you watch it. Pause and rewatch something if you need to. Make annotations on here, write things, highlight it. That's not just what I have. Okay, so the first thing is an inequality will define a boundary that divides a coordinate plane into two half planes. So we're graphing a line, but guys, it's not really a line. It's a boundary. It divides what's a solution from what is not a solution. Okay, so it's dividing it into halves. A solid line means the boundary is included. A dashed line means the boundary is not included. So you need to know what symbol means the boundary is included and what does it look like on the line. Another quiz question is how you can test a point to see which side to shade. You replace the x and the y with the values from the chosen point. The point cannot lie on the boundary. So if the graph goes through the point 0, 0, you cannot use the point 0, 0. Make sure you remember that. Also, make sure that you shade. If you haven't shaded, you haven't solved this. It's not graphing a line. Your line is only the boundary saying your answers are on one side or the other. If you haven't shaded, you haven't solved it. Then again, use 0, 0 if possible. And if it's true, you shade the side of the test point. If it's false, shade the side opposite. So let's look at an example. Here's number 1. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to graph the boundary and I'm going to make a dashed line because it cannot be equal to. So see, this is a dashed line. So we have -2 is my y-intercept. Slope is 3, so up 3 and over 1. So there's my boundary. So I have my boundary. Again, people miss this all the time. You have not solved it until you've shaded. You haven't ever said what the answer is. You just graphed the boundary. So I'm going to test a point. Are my answers on this side of the line or are they on this side? So what I would do is I would test a point. You have to test one that the line or the boundary does not go through. It does not go through 0, 0. So I'm going to test that point. I would always use 0, 0 if possible. And if not, I would use a point like 1, 1, 2, 2. Something to where if you mix up your x and your y, it doesn't matter because you're using the same number. So, if my inequality is true, I'm going to shade here because this is where my test point is. If it's false, I'm going to shade here. So, my test point is 0, 0. So I have replaced x and y with 0 and 0 from my test point. So 0 is greater than, well, 3 times 0 is 0, -2. Is 0 greater than -2? Yes, it is greater than -2. So I shade this side of the line. Any point over here makes my inequality true. Any point over here would make my inequality false. So any point, if I tested the point 2, 1, it would be false. Anything over here would be true. Let's look at number 2. Okay, I'm not ready to graph this yet because it's not in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. I'm going to add a -1 just so I can make sure I remember that for the slope. And then divide everything by 5. Okay, now I'm in slope-intercept form. I can make my boundary. It's going to be a solid line. So +2, -1, over 5. So it looks like this. Okay, there's my boundary. I have not solved until I have shaded one side or the other. So again, I'm going to test the point 0, 0. As long as my boundary doesn't go through there, I can use it. So I'm going to put a 0 in here for y and a 0 in here for x. So I have 0 less than or equal to 2. Is 0 less than or equal to 2? Yes. So since it's true, I shade the side where my boundary is. Now I have it. Last one. Okay, once again, I need to get it to where I can graph it. Subtract 5 on each side. And divide by 3. So I have x is less than 3. This should be the easiest thing to graph, although people typically struggle with it because they haven't memorized that anything that only has an x is going to be a vertical line with an undefined slope. So here is my boundary. Less than is over here. Any x values that are less than, that should be pretty easy. Here's 3. Less than is this way. So I shade. And these are all my answers. So make sure you annotate, maybe rewatch this, and take the Edmodo quiz.